At the end of RWBY Volume 7, General Ironwood and Team RWBY are presented with a moral dilemma. Do they evacuate all of Mantle but risk being overwhelmed by Salem's forces? Or do they use the power of the Relic of Creation to raise up Atlas instead of Amity so they can give those already evacuated and themselves a fighting chance? The general consensus among the community is that Ironwood's doing a necessary evil and is tactically sound in the moment. However, I'm here to take a closer look at the tactical situation, if the plan would work, its shortcomings, and possible alternatives. Before we proceed, this isn't meant to be a debunked or true style video, these are merely the observations of an armchair general who's had far too much time in Total War and watching a handful of military history YouTubers. Let's go over Ironwood's plan. General, in your own words if you'd please.
It was Oz's plan in a former life, but he didn't take it far enough. If we harness the power of the staff and raise ourselves high into the atmosphere, the city's artificial climate will keep citizens and food supplies unharmed, always out of reach of whatever Salem may try to send our way. We can't allow Salem to capture the relics. This is our best chance at getting the staff, the lamp, and the maiden as far away from her as possible.
As a short-term plan, aside from the massive loss of life, this is pretty good given the situation. Grimm have an upward flight limit described by Winter, and it takes the Relic of Creation and anyone on Atlas out of immediate harm's way. This also buys some time for Ironwood and his forces to regroup and figure out their next course of action. I emphasize that this should be a short-term solution because Atlas's prospects at a long-term siege aren't too bright. For our thought experiment, we'll need a few assumptions to hold. The first is that the Grimm's flight limit holds true. There doesn't seem to be anything special that would exempt Salem's pretties from this flight limit, so we'll assume they abide by it too. As for the whale, it's not known if this would abide by the flight limit too, since it does seem like a new type of Grimm, but for our thought experiment, we'll assume that it behaves like a real-world Zeppelin, so this thing isn't going above the cloud layer, or not too much above it. Second, we assume the airships will be able to fly to an altitude that exceeds that of the Grimm flight limit and can reach Atlas. This is less of a leap since we ourselves in the real world can exceed the flight limit of even the highest flying birds. Third, Ironwood's martial law holds and there are no defections or political uprisings within his own ranks. While it would be interesting to explore possible splinter groups that would arise, that is a bit beyond the scope of this video, so we will just ignore it for the time being. Fourth, Team Comp RWBY Jr. miraculously cooperates. This runs counter to what happens in the real show and completely opposite to Team RWBY's moral compass, but it's necessary because Ironwood's plan literally can't work in the show proper because the Winter Maiden herself ran away with Team RWBY. The Winter Maiden, no vault, no relic, and definitely no magical climb to 50,000 feet. So for our purposes, we'll allow the general this one just to give his plan the best possible chance of working. Of course, there will be some alternate history to address now. Because RWBY cooperates, Tyrion is successfully detained and number 1 husbando Clover Ebby gets to live. Cinderfall is successfully repelled before Freya dies and Winter gets to be the Winter Maiden. Because this whole fight scene is unnecessary now, the Aesops and RWBY won't be delayed in dealing with her. The only ambiguity here would be if Neo would get the lamp or not. But, given how her deceptions work perfectly and she has no trouble dispatching Team Orange, I'd say it's not too much of a stretch to say the Ice Cream Bandit succeeds. Ironwood won't be happy about this, but he'll likely continue with raising the city, since denying Salem another relic, and the Winter Maiden, is now his immediate concern. Now, in addendum to this, on Ironwood's failures in the show, effective military leadership needs charisma, force of personality, and the ability to play politics at times. There is a limit to military force. Mutinies and desertions are not entirely uncommon in ancient and modern warfare, and knowing how to prevent them is a skill.
Wow! My grandfather's old service revolver. To think of all the deserters he shot in the head with this.
Now, back to the siege. There are a few factors why I don't think this is going to work. Surprisingly, a lot of these aren't tactical reasons, they fall back to logistics. This manifests itself in 3 main things: food, water, and fuel.
Why can't we just use an airship to take these supplies to Amity?
The components for Amity Tower's construction are far too heavy. All that weight would require precious dust we should be saving for the launch itself, and the Grimm that will come after.
A common argument is that Atlas does have food production capability, as evidenced in this concept art. But the main problem here would be water. which farming requires an immense amount for. Because they're above the cloud layer, there definitely aren't many readily available sources. With that in mind, their food and water will run out. And when it does, morale, which would already be low from the massive civilian casualties, would plummet to unprecedented lows. Now, they could send a few airships to collect water vapor from that altitude, however, that would put them in risk of being attacked by Grimm. And furthermore, it puts another factor into play: ammunition and fuel. According to the World of Remnant, dust acts as both. All known dust mines are on the continent of Solitas, and it seems the majority of industry is located in Mantle. While there feasibly could be dust in these mountains back here, it's not known if they have equipment on Atlas to meaningfully mine and refine it. Since I have no doubt the Elysian aristocracy would see smokestacks as an eyesore. Elysian conventional and special forces, like the rest of humanity, depend on dust for everything from powering their communications to ammo and transport. This will limit the number of breakout attempts or the time Elysians can defend. Now, there are other potential methods for resupply. Assuming the fleet doesn't get blown out of the skies first, they could very well fly at altitudes that exceed that of the Grimm and go abroad to inform the other kingdoms or even resupply the besieged city if need be. However, it's not known if there will be enough dust production or willingness in other kingdoms to refuel these ships. With the political consequences of the dust embargo and failure at Beacon, it's unlikely the presence of an air fleet would be welcomed by any of the other kingdoms. Ultimately, the Elysians could resort to force to take what they need, but this would be counterproductive and play right into Salem's hands. Denying Atlas the chance to resupply is all Salem would really need to do to kill them. Let the humans starve out and leave the relics up there for a rainy day. You're immortal and you've got magic. You can figure something out eventually, I'm sure. Grimm don't need supplies, and losses can seemingly be infinitely replenished from the pools near Salem's lair, so they can sustain a siege indefinitely if need be. Depending on the air fleet situation, she may choose to leave a lieutenant to monitor the siege, while she herself goes on to attack the remaining stronghold of Vacuo. Her Seergrim are very capable communication tools and seemingly transmit information in real time with zero latency, which in a post-CCT world is a massive advantage. With this logistical situation in mind, we need to examine what holding out in such a position is meant to do in the first place. In typical warfare, when a force is besieged, it usually has three options on the table: wait, sally forth, or negotiate. For obvious reasons, negotiation is out of the question. Waiting, which General Ironwood seems intent on doing, is only tenable when reinforcements are on their way. Given how neither Vacuo, Mistral, or Vale have standing armies, it's unlikely that they have much to contribute other than a few daring huntsmen.
Next comes the military. While most kingdoms only call on its citizens to serve when needed, others find it important to be prepared.
Vacuo seems to be the last bastion of capable huntsmen, but I'm unsure if their government could compel all of them to sign up for such a task, since it seems they have trouble enforcing their own laws in peacetime. Also, due to the CCT system being down, any such message would likely take days or even weeks to reach those nations' governments, by which time it may already be too late. There are even problems if a message is instantly sent, like Team RWBY's alluding to.
If we launch the tower, we can all work together again. We could even call for help. If we can hold out long enough.
It would mean days or even weeks of travel for meaningful reinforcements to get there.
Ruby, how long did you think this journey was going to take?
Maybe like, 2 weeks?
What?
For these reasons, I don't think a long-term siege would be a good idea, but in the spirit of being solution-oriented, I've come up with a few ideas myself. Each of these presents their own positives and negatives. The first would be to abandon Atlas with all intact forces and civilians and head towards friendly territory. Argus in the north of Anima strikes me as the most immediate option. This is due to proximity and the fact that it seems the Kingdom of Mistral is friendly enough to Atlas. But it's not known if this one base has enough war materiel or concentrated firepower to support an army, especially since they are likely spent from the battle with Grimzilla. Vacuo is the other attractive option due to richness in dust and natural resources.
In the center of the vast desert was an oasis unlike anything you'd ever seen. A jungle bursting with natural resources, geographical defenses, and the world's largest recorded deposit of dust.
Of course, running would not give them much reprieve in either case. Salem would likely follow and attack as soon as possible to prevent an organized resistance from forming. Vacuo is relatively decentralized and Argus is relatively small, so the sooner she attacks, the better for her. The second option would not be a mass exodus, but rather an evacuation of Salem's immediate targets. The Winter Maiden, keeping the key to the relic out of her hands is a surefire way of delaying Salem's victory. She and a select team of huntsmen will seek refuge elsewhere, likely Vacuo or Argus as previously mentioned, but of course this won't go unnoticed, so some level of diversion would be necessary. For example, the Elysian air fleet could make an attack while Winter and Team RWBY slip away in the chaos. The remaining Elysians would have to repel Salem and keep up the facade that the Winter Maiden is still there. This would ultimately buy time for Vacuo to shore up his defenses for humanity's last stand. The largest negative of this is that it would necessitate a further, if not complete, sacrifice of the Elysian people. The third and most unlikely option would be what Team RWBY is loosely referring to: standing their ground.
And I think the right thing to do would be to stand our ground. Me too.
Me too. Me too.
An all-out offensive spearheaded by a surgical strike on Salem herself to cover continued civilian evacuations. An elite combined force with one silver-eyed warrior, the Winter Maiden, and Aesop supported by large firepower could turn the tide. A large, slow-moving target like the whale should amount to basic target practice for the fleet, or so I would hope.
All ships, fire at will.
Salem is indeed unkillable, but as evidenced in the past, she can still feel pain, or at the very least, discomfort. This could in turn lead to disruption of her control on the Grimm, and possibly a better chance at repelling the invasion. While an attack on Salem seems inevitable in the show proper, it cannot be understated how insanely reckless this plan is, to give up some of the world's best and brightest in one attack. But it's got Ruby Rose written all over it. A parallel can be drawn between RWBY and Ajin Demi-Human. The immortal Sato works on a similar basis as Salem. He can die, but regenerates quickly after death. He's almost captured by a Japanese special forces team, who cycle kill him repeatedly as a form of crowd control. It's not known if this trick would work for Salem, but hypothetically doing this and throwing her into the Maiden Vault, for example, could be a viable, albeit unlikely plan. Also, we're pulling back to meta-analysis for a moment. RWBY Volume 8 and 9 are confirmed, so this plan isn't likely to happen. Now, none of these are perfect solutions or solutions likely to work, but it's just a testament to how dire the situation is and how well Salem played it. So there you have it. I think there's a lot more nuanced Ironwood's plan here, and I think some of that's being missed in discussion, so that's why I brought some of these up. I'll definitely be looking forward to how Jimmy deals with the situation at hand when RWBY Volume 8 airs. Speaking of RWBY Volume 8, this video is brought to you by Salem, our one true queen. Sign up for the Church of Salem today, and I'm definitely not being forced to say this by a Scorpion boy. Did you agree with my thoughts here, or was there something I missed? Feel free to share your thoughts and my thoughts and your battle plans in the comments below.
Patrick here. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification button. Oh, and also check out the links we got below. Thanks for watching.